Hello, everyone. So we're here with episode 4, which we're going to be talking about sisters. And we've got our resident sisters expert Dan with us today. Mostly expert. You have been playing them a very long time, though. We kind of wanted to go into sisters because sisters been a bit an odd one in Ninth, where they've been kind of mediocre, then were very good, and now they're in a bit of an interesting spot. So what's been your experience with sisters kind of across Ninth?
Well, I mean, across Ninth, it's been a whirl, hasn't it? Because we had obviously early Ninth where we had our new book, and coming from like 8th where we had the indexes and things like that, it was really powerful. And then we got our new book, and it took us back a bit. It got rid of things like the shooting craziness with the retributors and all sorts of crazy things. Yeah, definitely got massively toned down. And then obviously we had the changes with armor and contempt and things like that. So it's been a really interesting run with sisters, I think, overall, since the whole new plastic range came out, which, you know, I'm from the days of pewter sisters and from their launch in 97. So I've been with them for a long time.
You have, and you've still got one of the metal sisters?
I still have several metal sisters, including a converted Celestine to act as a Canoness. I still got a few pewter ones, and I think I've got a few the old converted, the old transport vehicles. You used to love playing against, James.
They weren't my favourite. For anyone who doesn't know, that they used to have this transport called the Repressor. It's now a legend-only model, and effectively it was open-topped, so you could stick all your sisters in it. And it had flamers as well.
It had 2 heavy flamers and a storm bolter on it.
It was like an open-topped immolator. It was horrific.
And it was great because you used to be able to give him a 4-up invuln as well. So.
I don't miss those days.
No, I'm sure probably many people don't miss those days. But yeah, so I mean, I've been playing sisters for a very long time, and I've always loved them. So
I think what kind of the interesting thing, we'll kind of get onto why your sisters are quite different, but the kind of sisters had settled on this kind of trading piece, you know, using kind of Repentia, small or big units of Zephyrim to kind of trade with the enemy, taking out one thing of theirs, then in return losing something a lot less valuable. And when the Bloody Rose supplement came out, that just dialed that up to 10 really, or 11 I guess, as it was, because Bloody Rose sisters were everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you know, I've played Valorous Heart pretty much solidly since Sisters were re-released, just because they fit my playstyle a bit better. That said, obviously, I did journey over to Bloody Rose when Armor and Contempt came out, because one of my big bonuses of being Valorous Heart no longer existed, so I kind of moved over to sort of Bloody Rose and got a bit of an experience with that side of the game. Yeah. I mean, you're right, absolutely. Sisters have been very much a trading army. They're fairly cheap. Their units are fairly sort of, you can do them small and they hit hard. So yeah, they are a good trading army, but that's, as we'll get onto later, is not how I play Sisters of Battle.
No, it's different, and I think it does catch a lot of people off guard when you expect a kind of certain list. It's going to have 2 or 3 units of Repentia. It's going to have 2 or 3 units of Retributors, most often with 4 Melters and at least 1 Cherub. You're going to have your Battle Sisters, either the big unit of 20 or just a few standard 5-man or 5 lady squads. So let's get into it. So Valorous Heart. Why Valorous Heart?
For me, it's the ability to keep my units around a lot longer, which when you have a look at my army list later, you'll sort of see it a bit more. But ignoring AP1 and reducing AP2 to AP1, as we all got to enjoy Armor and Contempt for a while, we all got to understand what it does. So this is essentially Armor and Contempt, but in a mini version. Don't get against everything, but against the vast majority of weapons out there, you do. And that's a big thing. And I think you add on to that the 5-up against mortal wounds. That comes into play a lot more, especially when you consider Sisters a fairly good anti-psyker army anyway.
Yeah.
So when you play your games, Grey Knights, Thousand Suns, they're fairly straightforward games for Sisters of Battle players, because generally speaking, you're going to be auto-deny on 5-up with an auto-deny 4-up stratagem. And then if you then go Valorous Heart on top of that, you'll then 5-up against any mortal wounds that do manage to creep through. It makes you a very hard list to then break down for those opponents.
And I guess as well with Valorous Heart, most of the AP on Thousand Suns and Grey Knights, so AP 1 and 2. So you
Yeah.
got that added value of not only you getting the fight up against the mortals, but actually you're halving some of their damage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's again early days with like Chaos and Space Marines as well. They were all very much AP1 and AP2. So again, even into those kind of games, people would, like you say, get caught out by it because they would come into a unit thinking they were going to easily pick up a unit through mass attacks, but actually when those units were still getting their 2-up, 3-up armor saves, it meant that you were going to be sticking around a lot longer, which makes your return punch a lot harder as well.
And I guess in a way it helps negate the fact that you are mostly toughness 3.
Yeah, I think that's the other big thing as well. Is like you hit the nail on the head with the T3 across the board for the most part, apart from the odd vehicle and Paragon warsuits. So, you want to try and keep your units in the game if you can. And I found personally playing Valorous Heart for as long as I have, that tends to work quite well. It's a bit of a skew. Sometimes you come up against an opponent that has like the exact tools that you need to take on a Valorous Heart Sisters army, and you will lose those games. But for the most part, I found it very useful.
But I still think because even it went into those games, being sisters and the kind of nature of miracle dice, rolling those dice, getting those kind of automatic rolls where you need them when and where, you've still got some play. Maybe not as much as the kind of Bloody Rose traditional lists, but you've still got a bit of play.
Absolutely.
So Valorous Heart, correct me if I'm wrong, it's gone back to its old track.
Yes. Thankfully for me, I was so happy when this happened in Arcs. So yeah, they've gone back. They are exactly as they are in the Codex now, which for me, I'm very happy with that. Because when they got Armor of Contempt, everyone knows Sacresants didn't get it because they had shields, so they had a 2-up armor save. Which with the best will in the world, they're T3 with 1 wound. So it meant that they kind of disappeared from the game a little bit during.
Yeah, they did. And I think what I've noticed is because people were then taking AP2 and AP3 to try and get over the fact that Armor of Contempt is making AP1 and AP2 a lot worse. Then all of a sudden, the AP3, you're putting the Sacresants on 4-up saves. You're putting Battle Sisters on 5-up saves. So actually, the AP3 was that sweet spot of where you really wanted to be against Sisters.
Yeah, and you had to look at it as well. Like defensively, a Sister of Battle in cover had the same defensive output as a Sacresant. Only when you got to AP4, when their 4-up invuln kicked in. So actually, okay, I could take that, or I can take a 20-man Battle Sister squad who I can make transhuman, can do all these things too. Yeah. So it kind of made the Sacresants a little bit more obsolete in that regard. So yeah, Armor of Contempt hit them hard in the book.
And I guess actually because yes, what are the poleaxes called? They're not
halberds. They're halberds.
That's the word. I guess because they are strong, they are killy, but no more than Repentia or Zephyrin are. Yeah. So if you wanted something quick and kind of killy, you'd take those instead of Sacresants.
Absolutely.
Did they get a points deduction?
No, they didn't. They stayed. They took a points deduction in the last points update by 1 point. But no, they didn't previously. And like you're right. Like if you wanted a killy fast unit, you take Zephyrin because loads of attacks, strength 4, and they Bloody Rose AP4, 4 attacks each. Or you took high damage, which was the Repentia with damage 2, again high AP, lots of attacks. So yeah, exactly. So the Sacresants kind of sit in the zone of you want them because they're a bit more tough, but they weren't in Armor of Contempt.
And so I used to have real problems. Someone's got a big unit of 10, sit it on an objective, possibly some of them in cover. Trying to take that unit at ranged off an objective became really, really difficult. And then if you do that with just a Battle Sister squad, that's already on a 2-up save with Armor of Contempt. Yeah, you might as well spend the less points on the Battle Sisters.
Yeah, exactly that. So I think Armor of Contempt was a big thing for the Sacresants disappearing from the game a little bit. But coming back to being Valorous Heart, being back to normal, Sacresants are back to enjoying that lovely, ignoring AP1, reducing AP2, which means actually when you're sitting on cover with Sacresants, they still get their 2-up armor save against AP-2.
That's really good.
It's really good. So, it kind of works in that side of things. And the other big reason why I play Valorous Heart, and you've got it on the screen there, and that's Blind Faith. It's the stratagem. It's a fantastic strat. And I combine it with Exceptional Proficiency, which is a Celestine unit, gets +1 to hit. So when you combine the two together, you can guarantee a unit is generally going to be hitting on 2s.
Yeah.
There's not. I can't think of a time where I've been made to not hit on twos unless it was trans hit from like a special rule or something like that. But generally speaking, if you combine blind faith with exceptional proficiency, one of your units with a Celestine keyword is going to be hitting on twos. Which again, when we come to my list in a little bit, you'll see how that sort of plays into how the army plays.
And it's worth saying actually with Valorous Heart, I do like Retributors. I know you don't run them in Valorous Heart, but I do like them because of the blind faith mechanic. So you can still hit on threes.
Exactly that. You can hit them on free, and especially if you give them Morvenn Vahl full rerolls. So then, your opponent can throw all the minuses in the world at them. It won't matter because they'll move and then they'll shoot you with no penalties and they'll be hitting you on frees rerolling. So no, it is really good for that. You're right. I don't run Retributors, which a lot of Sisters players are probably going to gasp as I've said that, but
we're going to get there. It's worth the wait.
It is worth the wait. But yeah, so I find the strat works, and it's great because it works in combat as well. So when you come up against those opponents, where they go, oh yeah, I'm -1 to hit, actually no, we're not bothered by that.
And you're right with the Celestine proficiency, kind of making those Sacresants hit on twos and removing the -1. Suddenly, when the opponent goes, oh, you're -1 to hit, you spend your 2 CP. Suddenly, you're going from a 4 up to hit to a 2 up to hit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's good for Sacresants because they don't have mass attacks. They only have 2 attacks each base. So obviously if you get the prayer on them, they've got 3 attacks, but they're not like your Zephyr and Repentia who've got a load of attacks who can dish out and can deal with losing a few missing. But actually for the Sacresants, hitting on 2s with 6s exploding from the passion most likely, you're generally going to get quite a few hits out of that. And that's big. Makes them much more efficient in killing. And that's why I love this stratagem, because I think it makes the Sisters units more efficient when it comes to killing things.
And when you've got several units that can do the same thing, you kind of want them to be as efficient as possible, because you don't want a weakness kind of anywhere in your line. You need because the other thing, obviously, it not being the same stratagem that costs 2 CP, for example, then being 1 CP each, 2 different ones. You could put one in one place and another one in another place.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done that on many occasions where I'm like sort of in the reroll ones bubble for Morvenn Vahl for hits and wounds, and I'm shooting at say something like Harlequins, which are often got lots of -1s across the board, and I want to take out a couple of targets. Well, I can use the +1 to counteract a -1, and I can use this to counteract another minus. So I'm still hitting on frees rerolling ones. Yeah. So it just keeps that efficiency up. Which for my list is really important, because if I start to lose efficiency, then I start to lose my damage output.
Well, I mean, efficiency is kind of the name of the game. We've seen over the whole kind of 8th and 9th edition, the kind of reroll 1 hit roll or reroll 1 wound roll, that those factions have trended towards being very strong. All the factions that have got +1 hit, we know Ynnari is doing very well at the moment. Same deal there. You give a whole army +1 a hit. It's really good.
Yeah.
So, do you use the Warlord trait and Relic with Valorous Heart?
I've used it sporadically. I used to use the Relic quite a bit when Chaos were a bit more.
And what are they? I guess that'll be
okay. Well, okay, yeah. So obviously the trait is a 5-up, feel no pain on your character. So fairly straightforward. Nothing, I used to use it a lot when I used to use the Armour of Saint Istaela character build. So that was Blessed Blade, going for the Rapturous Blows for extra damage. So you basically make a super killy character.
Yeah, because Rapturous Blows gives a +1 strength, +1 damage.
+1 damage. Then Armour of Saint Istaela gave you a +1 wound, 2+ armor save, and transhuman permanently.
Oh my
yeah. And then you chuck in the 5-up, feel no pain. It made a Canoness who was like 80 points.
Yeah.
Really difficult to remove from, I used to use that quite a lot.
Really good.
Yeah. And I used to use the Casket of Penance, which is the Relic, a fair bit, especially when Chaos were more prevalent. And that's because it's a 3-inch aura of -1 toughness. And if it's Chaos, it's also -1 strength as well. Wow. So it's quite a good Relic, but it's got a short, small aura. So getting it to where you need it, I did start using it because I thought, oh, that's really good, especially against Chaos, because it was coming in quite handy. But actually, generally speaking, when they're in your lines, even if you make a -1 toughness and -1 strength, they've got to you to charge, at which point you're not getting to hit back and benefit from it. So at first it seemed like a really good thing, and I started to use it, but I found quickly that it wasn't really doing anything in the army. But on paper, they're both really good. I've never managed to get them to work quite right.
I guess the Relics also suffers from the point that you don't want to be going into those kind of long drawn out conflicts. You want to be able to trade or pick up the thing before it picks you up effectively.
Yeah, ultimately, and also you've got to remember that outside of the named characters, our characters are quite squishy. Obviously, I talked about the Valorous Heart Canoness build, who could be quite tough, but actually, the mega tanky Canoness, who I've had survive railguns to the face, but but realistically,
for no pain against the immortal wounds.
Yeah. So, but I mean, generally our characters are quite squishy. So you also don't want necessarily your characters being that close. And again, generally as sisters players, you tend to take quite a few characters, which means you could be risking assassinate. So you want to keep them safe behind your lines. So you don't want them that close that they might get picked up by someone.
No, and I've always found, like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this. You take assassinate against sisters player, and then they keep all 7 characters behind a little ruin because they can. And they're only there for buffs, really, other than Morvenn Vahl. And she doesn't need to go that much. She's also not easy to kill at half damage, 2-up save, 4-up invuln.
Yeah.
So it can be quite tricky to take those combat sisters characters and take those kind of short range utilizing, with that 3-inch bubble's not a lot. Kind of want that character up there. You men might suffer with the assassinate.
Yeah, I mean, I did. When I first started running it, I was running it on a Word of the Emperor character. So the one that turns off invuns once per game and does the fight last, because they wanted to be within 3 inches. But I found I was putting a lot of points and a lot of CP into that character to do something that then generally they did it like once per game and then got picked up because they were too close to the action. And actually that's not really what they wanted to be doing. You're absolutely right in that most sisters characters, they're there to buff, they're there to provide sort of changes and give things to units to make them better, not to really get deep into the action themselves. That's where your Celestines and your Morvenn Vahls come in, really.
And they are very good, both. I've been telling you for a long time, Celestine's very, very good.
I have a deep, deep love for Celestine. I have my pewter Celestine still. I still have her. She's converted. I love Celestine, but I did struggle until the new Arcs of Omen came out to fit her in the list alongside my Zephyr and things, because I found I was having to give up something to put her in my list. But anyway, we're talking about the army, and we'll get to that in a minute. We sort of wandered off onto, but yeah. So sort of talking Valorous Heart again. Still, one of the other things I like combines really well with Valorous Heart is the other stratagem, which is Moment of Grace, and it is one of my favourite. It's a massively underrated one by sisters players, and that is you spend a CP and you can discard 1 to 2 miracle dice and change a dice roll before a hit, wound, or a save, and I will invariably be using it on a save, and it comes in all the time for the units that I use, and it's one of those things you can. It's not, you pay 1 CP for a reroll to try and pass something, whereas sisters, you don't need to pay to try, you just pay to do. And I think that's a real big thing. Being able to go, oh no, Morvenn Vahl has failed 2 saves and she's going to die. Oh, well, I'm going to just do this and spend a miracle dice and automatically become a 4, so now she's passed that save. And the amount of times that's come up for me for all of my models and characters in the game, I think that's probably my most used stratagem, if I'm completely honest. And it pairs well with the toughness of Valorous Heart. Makes it very easy to sort of like really make it disheartening for your opponent to realise that they're not taking stuff down.
Especially because a lot of the stuff in the army has a native 4-ups in one save.
Yeah.
Or the armor, the 2-up armor saves to a 4-up are quite easy to get a 4-up save on most of the army.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly that. So
with the sisters' natural 6-up save, if you roll a 4, you can just do that Moment of Grace and get that 6 that you need. Even if you haven't rolled a 6 on the miracle dice. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, that's come up a few times. Obviously before sort of Paragon Warsuits, before Armour of Contempt, and now again after Armour of Contempt, they're back to being only really a 6-up invuln to protect them, other than a 2-up armor save. So that once again, that's like really key, like because most sisters players, they've probably got a 6 floating around in there and maybe a couple of other dice, and a lot of the time, a lot of those dice are 2s and 3s that aren't entirely useful, but Moment of Grace makes them useful, because Moment of Grace takes those 2 dud ones that you weren't sure what you were going to use them for and allows you to change. So you're right. So all of a sudden, that 6-up save that you just failed, actually, you can actually realistically pass it on a 4-up.
You roll the 4 and then you just miracle. Oh, that Warsuit's fine. He's going to fire a melter at the next turn.
Yeah, and I think I played a game against our friend who on the channel who was here last week, Liam. We played a while back, and I was playing Morvenn Vahl, and he came at me with Bellicor, and he was like, oh, I'm going to whack you. And I was like, well, he's AP. All I need to do is roll at least a 3, and I know that I can burn 2 miracle dice to pass. And I did, and survived against Bellicor, and then Bellicor promptly died to Morvenn Vahl slapping him back.
Horrific. So, Contempt, which this stratagem, the moment of Grey stratagem was even better.
Yeah.
The additional -1 AP meant you needed a 3, which...
Yeah, exactly that. So I only needed the roll of 3, which meant that I could then burn 2 miracle dice and get to that 5. So it really pairs really well with that toughness from Valorous Heart. And like I said, it's one of my favourite strats.
What I quite like, when I've seen you do before as well, with combining the Valorous Heart, ignoring the AP 1 and 2, is those 3s and 4s that you roll, you can use quite regularly on armor saves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if they're AP 2, your 2-up save on your Warsuit or your Sacresant, it's actually a 3-up save, and you can use that 3-up to make that critical that you need. Yeah,
absolutely. And I've done, again, comes up loads, again, just last week when we were at the St. Albans tournament, my Paragon Warsuits got hit by a load of weapons. One of them was really high damage, and I needed to get that cheeky 3-up because it was low AP but high damage, and I didn't want to pass it over to another suit, so I just passed it, and then that meant another high damage had to go onto that 1 wound, which then meant I then had 2 suits left on full wounds, which
is exactly where you want to be.
Which is exactly where you want to be. So yeah, and there's something Sisters players, I don't know how many people do it, but I know I've started doing it a lot more, and that's rolling. If you're doing batch rolling, don't roll all your dice, maybe roll like 3 or 4 of them, and then keep a couple back, because you might want to miracle one a bit later on, or roll them one at a time, because I think that's key to know when you're going to use your miracle dice. I think it's a big thing as a Sisters players to know when you want to use those miracle dice, those important moments to give one of those up to save something critical. And it may not always seem critical, but sometimes it can be critical. Like I said, that moment, it would have still had 2 suits left, but it would have been 1 suit on 1 wound and 1 suit on 4 wounds, whereas I ended up with 2 suits on 4 wounds, which then meant my opponent had to do another round of trying to chew through Paragon Warsuits, which is not easy because they do hit back really hard.
Obviously, you mentioned the St. Albans Slam number 2. Which this
2 points behind you, I hasten to add.
You did very well. So you did. You came second.
I came second. Yes.
Amazing.
And I played Guard, Custodes, and Harlequins. So not necessarily easy matchups.
Guard, especially, I would have thought. Guard and Custodes are kind of 2 of the kind of more top ends of the meta at the moment. Harlequins seem to be making a resurgence. Everybody thought they were going to be terrible with 5-pin runs. Turns out they still score really well, and the Death Jester madness is still mad, and nobody I've talked to can understand why it was unnerfed. But we're going to go into that another time. Here it is.
Here it is in all its glory. Apologies for the poor photo. So yeah, I mean, it's fairly straightforward in what it does, really. So you'll see there straight away the telling feature of the army is 30 Sacresants and 9 Paragon Warsuits. That is the absolute core of the army, and it's for a very good reason. 2-up save. Need I say more? Because with the Valor, and this is why we talked about Valorous Heart first before we came to this, because it sort of puts into your mind why Valorous Heart's so important for this list, is that it is vastly, outside of maybe 1 or 2 units in the whole entire list, is 2+ armor save.
Yeah, it's a real skew list. I think this is the kind of list that you could see in a team tournament that you can put up against another army when you can kind of more accurately choose who your opponent's going to be. Put it up against someone who just cannot deal with this. You come up against orcs where most of it's AP 1 and 2, and pretty much most of the time you're going to have a 2-up save. Yeah,
and then this sort of goes back to where we were earlier. Those Sacresants, when they're in cover, AP -2, they've still got a 2-up armor save.
Rough,
which, I've played Thousand Suns many times at tournaments, and every time they absolutely hate it, because I'll stick 3 or 4 in the cover, and I'll have 1 or 2 sitting on the objective, and I'll just keep taking it on the guys in cover, and they'll just soak up a load of fire. And you will lose some, because at the end of the day, they are T3 at the end of the day. You're going to roll some 1s. Yeah. But it makes your opponent's attacks very inefficient in the job they're trying to do. So what this army's really good at is making that small arms fire fairly redundant. All those AP1s, strength 4 AP1s, and mass shots, and sort of, again, the guard player, when I played the first game, 2 units of mortars that were always strength 5, AP -1, but it didn't matter. It just bounced off the Sacresants because they didn't care. It was 2 up armor save, so I was maybe losing 1 or 2. So they were having to sort of plow. All of a sudden, they're having to plow their anti-tank guns, like their plasma and stuff, into the Sacresants just to move them off an objective.
Yeah.
And
so then you got a 4-pin them.
Yeah, exactly that. So it and it was really funny. The Custodes player I played in the second game was a really nice guy, but he said, he was having to use his weapons that are there to kill really elite heavy infantry to kill a 14-point Sacresant model. And even then, it wasn't guaranteed, and, again, and I think that's why the sort of Custodes match went my way, is because he put a unit of 3 or 4 Wardens with -3 on them, but they don't have enough tax to chew through. And when you make them -1 to wound with shield wall, involatile for the Sacresants, they were back to wounding you on 3s instead of 2s. All of a sudden, it kind of amounts up. And by the end, even if you're making 10 saves, you're only going to lose statistically 5 of those Sacresants. You don't care. You lost 5 Sacresants. Also, they've got halbards, which is the great sweet spot for fighting Custodes because they're in strength 6 on the return.
AP3.
So AP3. Yeah, they are great. I mean, I know that there's often a lot of sisters players that debate the mace and halberd. I will always take halberd because I just think it's more useful in more situations.
I think as well for you as well, you have the Paragon War suits to do anything that the maces might need to do.
Yeah.
So you can go full in on the halberds because you already have the kind of what the maces would be doing already covered.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important actually to talk about the list build. So obviously, I was running something similar to this early last season. I took it to Bournemouth.
And the season before.
And the season before.
You've run a variation of this list for maybe 4 years.
Yeah, it's true. As soon as Paragon War Suits came out, I was all over them. But yeah, so, I ran. But back then we had to do battalions and things like that. The new Arc of Omen gives us so much more flexibility. And for my list build, specifically, as you can see, I don't have any troop choices. I'm no longer bound by taking Sisters of Battle, which means I've been able to fit in the beloved Celestine. And she's big for the list. And not because she's a frontline fighter. She's a good fighter, but that's not what I use her for. I use her for a flank harassment. And more importantly, getting out to those really awkward to reach side objectives that normal Sisters units are too slow to get to go do Sacred Ground. So near enough every game in that tournament in the RTT, first turn she was off on a very side flank doing Sacred Ground before the opponent could come and take her off of it. So she was basically there to get me turn 1 full VP on the chart. And then she moved into their backline. They have to deal with her. She's Celestine. She does kill stuff. She's really annoying. And in every game, she just distracted my opponents from having to deal with the army that's moving up. Another big thing for the Arc of the Omen, which I actually think completely counteracts losing Armor of Content on them, is the fact you can put Paragon War Suits in Strategic Reserve for free now. I can't overstate how much that came up at that tournament.
So this is kind of one thing you'd always struggled with. You had your 30 Sacresants, you had your 9 Paragon War Suits. Your Paragon War Suits, they move 8 inches, maybe?
8 inches, yeah.
It's not super quick, not 6 inches, not 5 inches,
Yeah, it's fast enough that they can get up the board fairly quickly, but they have to be exposed. Yeah. They have to be out in the open for at least one turn if you want to get them to where you want to get them.
Well, they're visual as well, right? So they can't go through visual walls.
Yeah.
They have to go around things. They have to go up and over those little silly ruins we play with in UKTC.
Yeah.
But Strategic Reserve was always never an option.
Because it cost 2 CP to per unit.
It was 2 CP per unit.
Yeah. So it often meant that if I was going to do it, it would only be 1 unit. And that would be my matchups like Tau, where there wasn't physically enough terrain to hide everything. So you have to put it somewhere. You don't want to be out in the open for turn 1 shooting. So there. But then, of course, again, you only had 6 CP, which when I was doing a battalion and patrol, I'm already on 4 CP, so I'm then having to spend 2 of my CP. I've already spent a CP on a Warlord trait before I know I'm down to 1 CP starting. And that's not really where you want to be. It gets a bit sort of tight, especially when you'd want to do things like Moment of Grace and that in the first turn to save potentially something that got caught out of place and whatnot. Now, I can put them out for free. And in every game at the RTT, 2 units were in reserve every game.
Wow.
And it was the first tournament I played in Arcs. I've been a little bit slow getting into the season so far. So it was my first tournament. So Yeah, so I was a bit sort of nervous getting into it and whatnot because it'd been a while since I played. I think LGT had been the last time I played up until that point. I was a little bit, I'd been, So I mean, I think maybe I did one RTT in the December, but otherwise I'd been really busy with life, as we all know what happens. So I was quite nervous going into this RTT because it's been a while and I hadn't played Arcs yet. So obviously built my list and we had it here, but I've, against the guard straight away I was like, well, I'm going to put 2 units into reserve. The guard player got first turn and he'd also put his 3 plasma tanks in reserve, which was great because I knew those tanks would have to come on before my Paragon Warsuits would come on. And they were the weapon that scared me. Damage free, AP -3, even with my reduced damage by 1 on the Paragon Warsuits.
There's that kind of, it's a damage 3 kind of high strength, high consistency shots that really kind of do rip through Paragon Warsuits. They're not invincible. No. They are tough, but if you've got the right weapons to deal with them, they will just collapse.
Yeah, absolutely. So they were the thing I was most scared of when I saw the guard list. So I was like, straight away, I'm going to put these into reserves and we'll see if we can prompt him to either come on before me, or as it turned out, he got first turn. So he had to come on before me. And exactly, he brought them all on. He saw the Sacresants as the strategic threat because they were getting up onto the objectives and he couldn't remove them with any of his other weaponry. So he brought his plasma tanks on, promptly killed a unit of Sacresants, but then afterwards my Paragon Warsuits turned up and picked up the plasma tanks because 6 metal shots each. Yeah. They're going to do that. Yeah. So and then it just kind of worked in every single game. Again with sisters, we often got that 9 sitting there for that charge. So what I was finding was they were coming on from the edge of the board. I was shooting something a little bit further away with their 24-inch range, and then charging the unit that was closer to them to get that 9-inch charge off. So, against the Custodes player, came on, shot a dread that was a bit further away, and then charged a unit that was on an objective nearby. So it actually was working really well because
that's really good. I like that.
Yeah, and me and you discussed it sort of last season. One of the things this list was struggling with was long-range weaponry, especially against you and your Necrons or your Destroyers.
Hey, we played a game and I had my Locust Destroyers, and I was playing the faction where I got the extra 3-inch range, the sub-faction, OBSEC and extra 3-inch range. And it meant I could just stay just out of range and shoot you with the heavy destroyers. And you couldn't do anything about it.
I couldn't do anything. Even with my full move of 8, I couldn't get in range to shoot at them. And the best I could do was Morvenn Vahl was picking up one of them and you were just reviving them. So it was really awkward. And I was finding that was coming up not just against your Necrons, but against other opponents where they would have longer range guns, which meant that it was 2 turns before my Paragons could get in range.
And by then they had 2 turns of being shot at.
Exactly. Whereas now, they come on, they've got a 24-inch range, which generally means even if your opponent screens you out, you're generally going to be in range of that unit you actually want to shoot. They have to do some real deep screening to keep you more than 24 inches away from them. And again, that came up massively over the weekend. Multiple times I was getting into those units. Like the Custodes player had 2 Helverins right in the back corner. Unit of Paragons came on, melted the back one and charged the front one. So again, came in, shot the back one with the guns, and then charged the next one. So bogging them down, keeping them in.
This is what I really like about your Valorous Heart kind of Paragon Warsuits, is because like Armigers is something we're seeing a lot of in the meta at the moment. Both Chaos with World Eaters and kind of the Imperium one as a kind of gap fill for a lot of different types of armies. AP2 damage 3. Valorous Heart. AP1 damage 2 on the Paragon Warsuits.
Yeah, exactly that. And because what I was doing, my swords were starting off on the sideline because they get more attacks than my mace suits. So obviously you'll see it there in the list. Most Sisters players who do play Paragon tend to play with 1 mace on the sergeant and 2 swords. I tend to like to focus my units on their job they're doing, so I know sort of where they're going to be. So the mace suits tend to stay quite close to Morvenn Vahl because they have got the -1 to hit on the maces. So they're going to be the one unit that wants the full rerolls, and they also want the prayer from the Dogmata for +1 attack because they also get less attacks. So the swords generally have enough attacks, and with with the efficiency, the Celestine proficiency, you can make them hit on 2s, exploding on 6s. All of a sudden, they're sort of 5, 16. There's 4 attacks each, +1 for the sergeant. So math now, 13 attacks. It makes their 13 attacks more impactful, whereas the maces don't quite get that, so they need the rerolls.
The mace has become an option as Valorous Heart because you've got that 1 CP strat to ignore the hit rolls. So again, it's about the efficiency of how the army works. Is you can do that 2 CP, they're now hitting on 2s. Maces hit on 2s are not Not a funny business for anyone.
No. And they're flat damage free. They are essentially, for all intents and purposes, thunder hammers. So, they hit like a truck, and so they tend to stay on the board. They do want a unit that stayed on the board, got the Morvenn Vahl rerolls pretty much every turn, and the others then cropped up from the edges or used the stratagems to hit better. Again, we're talking about that efficiency. So a unit was coming on and was instantly able to hit on 2s against anything, which again is big when you're firing 6 melter shots. You want those melter shots to hit. Also, again, as we were saying earlier, it makes those 2s that you get on those miracle dice useful. You go, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to use them for I haven't got anything for a high damage shot. But I'm also, you got to remember as well, with coming in from strategic reserves, you're often going to be in half range for a multi-melter for 12 inches.
Yeah, no.
So you're getting the +2, and a lot of the time I was getting that +2 damage. In fact, like in the last game against the Harlequins, in my second turn, I picked up 2 Void Weavers, 3 transports, and 3 units of troops, 5 troops, because the Paragons just came in on from either side of the board. And the melters were in melter range of these transports, so I was able to quite happily, make a unit hit on 2s. So I was able to split fire 3 melter shots into each. And because their save is now 5, even when they failed 2 saves, they automatically die because it's a flat 6 damage straight away off the bat.
If you're coming on from strategic reserve, you can stay within that sweet spot against Harlequins where you're not. I think it's trans
hit. I wasn't trans hit. So
your normal weapon skills.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly that.
And you only really need 1 melter to get through to kill a transport. Yeah,
exactly. Especially when you've got +2 damage. You're only looking at 4. And that's, again, a miracle dice in the pool with a 4. You put it down, you got +2 damage. All of a sudden, that's damage 6, and you picked up a transport. So, yeah, like a lot of that, like I said, you can see how the Valorous Heart really plays into this list build. It's very much built on the fact that, on the 2+ armor save, you're going to have to chew through it. With your small arms fire, I mean, small arms fire against the war suits is essentially useless. If you're AP 1 and damage 2, there's no point firing it at the war suits because they will save it on a 2-up and they'll reduce any damage down to 1 if it goes through. So it's and it also makes like units like the Kassakin with loads of plasma guns. They came in. Again, there was no point in them overcharging because they weren't getting to damage 2. So again, it kind of skews the efficiency of some of those damage 2 weapons.
And again, obviously you mentioned Kassakin. They are the big kind of danger unit that's everyone knows. Come in, deal 1 million mortal wounds, loads of damage. You've got the save against the mortal wounds. You're reducing their AP.
Yeah.
I think because they are AP2 normally, aren't they?
They are AP2. They generally will probably have a strat or something put in place to give them the extra AP, the order. But again, they dropped down, like you say, they did like 2 units worth of 6 mortal wounds to each unit. But I think I spiked and actually saved 3 on both of those. So I actually only took 3 mortal wounds, and he was doing it into Sacresants who still have their 4-up in Vun save. So, all of a sudden, I did lose quite a few Sacresants from each unit, but by the end of it, I still had like half a unit each left that were able to then, I think I had 2 Sacresants charge from behind a wall into a tank, then got charged by a unit of guardsmen and held a tank and the guardsman up for 2 turns. And then ultimately, I think one of them, the last person stabbed the tank and blew it up, and it was really hilarious. And I survived the explosion as well because I have a 5-up against mortal wounds. So it was quite a hilarious moment of the game. It was quite a funny moment.
This is what I think is really good about the way kind of your sister's build works in the fact that most other sisters don't. Most other sisters builds, and having played, splash into a bit of sisters myself, you're throwing out a unit and expecting it to die. You go, here, I'm going to throw some Repentia in, they're going to pick up whatever I want them to, but they're dead afterwards, and that's fine, because they've done their job. I'm going to put 10 Zephyrim into something, they're going to kill something, then that's fine, because then they've done their job. Whereas you walk towards them, you come on from the flanks, you just don't die.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that's what catches a lot of people out, because I think you're right. So many people are used to playing sisters like that. In fact, the Harlequins player I played in the last game, we were both on 2 wins each. And he came up to me and was like, "Oh, am I facing the usual sisters, Repentia, Retributors?" No, I don't have any of that. I actually really like the Paragon Warsuits versus Retributors. I know a lot of people do, but actually the points gulf difference is getting smaller with each passing edition. Yeah. And I'd rather have. Because I used to play Retributors, and whenever they would get out of a vehicle, they'd shoot once, and then invariably your opponent would go, "I really want that unit dead. I don't want it to do that again." And even though they got nerfed from the last Sisters Edition to this Sisters Edition, people still have those bad memories of Retributors absolutely coming out and shooting craziness and doing the extra damage with melters of the strat and all things like that. So people will...
they still come out and do all of that, just not as consistently. Like,
yes,
they still come out of a transport and pick up most of the things they want to kill.
absolutely. So, but then they die afterwards. Whereas the Paragons do a very similar job with they've got one less melter, true, but they won't generally die to return fire. So then they're there again the next turn. And when you've got 9 of them to deal with, it makes it very difficult. It makes it very difficult. You're going to have a lot of high damage, high AP weapons to deal with them. And even then, with Moment of Grace and Miracle Dice, you're still not guaranteed to kill them because, they're, I think I did it. No, it wasn't against the Vanquisher, but it was another weapon that the guard player fired at me. It was really high damage and, high AP. And I managed to spike a 6 and then get a 6 with Miracle Dice and then do Moment of Grace and pass 3 saves. So, exactly. So, even if you do get to the point where you've got the weaponry to hit those Paragon Warsuits, they've still got that outside chance to just cause a little bit of annoyance by not dying because you've got the ability to mess around with it.
This is what's really, really powerful about this build in particular is you have to dedicate all of your weaponry to killing one thing, which means the 30 Sacresants, even if you kill 1 unit, there's still 2 units coming towards you. Even if you kill 1 unit of Paragon Warsuits, now with Arcs of Omen coming in strategic reserves, you got to think these 2 other units might appear from anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've still got that classic Zephyr squad in there as well. Even though I'm not playing Bloody Rose, I know they're best in Bloody Rose, but they've got enough attacks. And with the prayer from the Dogmata, the War Hymn to give them +1 attack, they generally still, even in Valorous Heart, can pick up what they charge fairly easily with full rerolls from Morvenn Vahl. So,
So I guess you've still got 1 trading unit, is what we should say.
Yeah. I've still got that 1 trading unit that's there to go in and sort of be a pain. They can either start on the board and sort of move into a staging position, or I can put them into deep strike, and bring them down and do the 9-inch charge and just be annoying, and hold something up or pin something down, So in that respect, I've still got that unit to do a trade or to be the fast response. Sort of return charge, against the Custodes. I lost a unit of Sacresants in the middle, but then staging just behind were a unit of Zephyrim, who then went in and promptly picked up the Custodes because they're strength 4, but they were re-rolling everything, and I gave them +1 to wound with embodied prophecy, so they're wounded on 4s. So they generally will pick up most things, even outside of Bloody Rose. So I've got them, and they're really good for that. And like I said to you, I kind of use Celestine in the same way. And again, like you said earlier, most people don't take Assassinate Against Sisters because of that very reason you said earlier, is that you can hide things. And now Celestine doesn't give up 9 points with her bodyguard.
She becomes an easier choice to try and
So you don't mind losing her. So that's what I kind of use her for. She isn't like that frontline fighter. I use her to harass the flanks, to deal with like those mini units who go, that unit you stick a unit of scarabs on the side unit, on the side objective, and go, okay, well, you're going to have to do something to deal with that. Celestine is my answer to those things, and she does that really well. And actually, having used her over that entire weekend for the first time in ages that I've used Celestine, absolutely, she should be in every list from now on because I think she just does that job well.
So that's Celestine. What about the other characters? Obviously, we spoke a bit about Morvenn Vahl. Do you take the Warlord trait with Morvenn Vahl?
Absolutely. I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest with you, people, if you're watching right now, as a Sisters player, if you're not taking Morvenn Vahl or a Warlord trait, you're doing something wrong. Absolutely. Full rerolls to hit and to wound in combat. And her prowess is in combat. I mean, she's got the missile launchers and the heavy bolter, which do come in. They do a bit of work. But when she gets into combat, that's where she shines. She's especially with the fact that a lot of people forget when you're playing, when nearly all of my opponents forgot that she can at least once per game fight twice. So, so she charged into, to Leontis and a guard unit, and she obviously used all of her attacks to kill Leontis. And then when it came to the end of the fight phase, I swung again to kill all of the guard that were on the objective and take the objective, because she then did sweep and just killed them all.
She's amazing, and I think anyone who's kind of remotely played competitive knows Morvenn Vahl is you don't build a list, you don't build a 2,000 point list. You build Morvenn Vahl and 1,800 points of Sisters.
Absolutely, I can't see a world where you don't take her, and but I mean we're seeing more and more armies with pieces like that now. I just mentioned Leontis, Trajan, Valorous, and Custodes. We're seeing this a lot more. We're getting these big characters who you generally always take in a list because they do so much for the list. So I guess that leaves us with the last character, and she's actually really important, despite the fact she's only a little Canoness. So she has the Rod of Office, which is pick a Adepta Sororitas core or character unit within 12 inches, give it reroll 1s. So that lets you pick a unit and send it off somewhere.
Yeah.
And again,
plus one to hit on the Celestines, which is all the Sacresants and all the Warsuits.
Paragon Warsuits, yep. So all of a sudden, and also it really helps on those units that come onto the board who may not be in the 6-inch aura range of Morvenn Vahl or Herd for the rerolls. The next turn, she can go, cool, that unit just turned up, who's 12 inches away from me. You've got reroll 1s, and you can keep going now deeper into your opponent's territory. You can get right into there. So, and that's, again, in game 3 against the Harlequins, that's exactly what happened. The Paragon Warsuits turned up on the flank, and they were just inside 12 inches. And next turn, they were given reroll 1s and sent deep into the sort of back lines. And that meant that they still had reroll 1s for a turn when they were miles away from the rest of the force. So it's quite
all about that efficiency, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. Again, it's all about that efficiency. It's about trying to build that efficiency into the list, making sure we've got reroll rolls and all.
Celestine efficiency.
Celestine efficiency, yes, absolutely.
It.
And then she's got Emperor's Grace. Now, most people take the Word of the Emperor miracle, which is...
We've talked about this a lot, actually.
Yeah, we have. And they always take the Word of the Emperor, which is choose a unit within 3 inches, fight last, and once per game you can turn off inbuns. The problem is it's turn off enemy units inbuns within that aura. And the miracle dice, you realistically, to make that work, you need that 6 to make it a 6-inch aura, because a 3-inch aura makes it very tough for that Canoness to get in. And I've just never found that I can get it to quite work or get it to get to the right point where it does that amazing job of turning off someone's inbuns. And what I also find is I've got normally enough attacks and stuff that even if they've got an inbun, it doesn't really matter that much. So what I take is the Emperor's Grace, which is the character heals D3 wounds in the command phase, great. But once per game, I'm turning off all hit rerolls, all wound rerolls, and all damage rerolls.
And it's a bubble.
And it is a bubble. And sisters, and it's any Adepta Sororitas character order characters and units in that bubble. So that is very easy to make a 3-inch bubble and hit multiple units with it. And it's in your control.
Celestine, isn't it?
Yeah. Bar Celestine and Vahl, because Vahl's not order either. So, but generally you're not going to be targeting them because they're bodyguarded by a load of...
Sacresants, you've got to get them first.
Yeah, exactly that. So, again, plays into that toughness of Valorous Heart. I find it works well because that one turn I am going to expose the army coming forward. All of a sudden, you've now got 30 Sacresants you can't re-roll anything against.
Yeah, that's...
all those Paragon Warsuits, you're not going to get any... And, going back to LGT, when I was playing Bloody Rose, I was still taking this, and I was playing Tau, and it absolutely ruined my Tau, because I came out with all of my Paragon Warsuits, put them all inside the bubble. There was no rerolls to hit, wound, or damage, which for a Tau player is absolutely huge. No Montcar rerolls, nothing like that.
They don't have a commander that rerolls everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it can really mess with like certain armies who absolutely rely on rerolls.
We've played when I've had the Silent King and you've done it, and I've just said, well, I can't engage this turn. Because if I do, you're going to kill more of me than I do in return, and then you have a turn.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So I find that's really, 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 really good, really helpful, and like I said, plays really well into the Valorous Heart build of 2-up armor saves, 4+ inbuns, and now you can't re-roll anything. So it just, again, it compounds that issue that your opponent's having of trying to pick up those units, because all of a sudden that Kassakin unit that drops in with full re-rolls from Leontas no longer has its doesn't have that. So now are they going to have to hold them back for another turn, or are they going to deploy and hope they do the work now? It really can skew your opponent's sort of decision on what they're going to do, because they can see this big juicy ball of death coming towards them, but they know that if they come out, it's exceptionally difficult to pick up, and ultimately it's exceptionally difficult to do when you've got no rerolls at all of any kind, especially on the Warsuits. No rerolls damage comes up a lot more than you think, especially when your opponent's like either D3+1 or DP3+3 or the D6. That one they roll and go, I really want to re-roll that one so I can just get another point to kill a suit. No, you can't re-roll that. So you're going to have to suck it up. You did 4. Now that suit's got 1 wound because of...
this is it. With a D6 weapon, you need 5 damage. You need a 5 on the dice to guarantee you kill a Warsuit, which is that likely, so you're only going to get 33% of the time.
Exactly. So, and it really frustrates someone when they go, right, this sort of plan I had to deal with your units to blow you up and take out these Paragon Warsuits. Well, now that I'm essentially having to use 2d6 weapons to pick up a single suit.
And that's how this whole build works, right? You've made yourself very efficient. We talked about that with the ignoring hit modifiers and ballistic skill modifiers, with the +1s to hit, the Rod of Office giving reroll 1s, Morvenn Vahl giving Pearl her rerolls. And then you tie that in with making them really inefficient at killing you, ignoring the AP1, reducing AP2 to 1, all the miracle dice shenanigans everyone knows and loves with sisters or hates. Topped on the fact that you've then got this really powerful ability of just you can't reroll.
Yeah, and actually I think it's the second cheapest of the miracles. It's only 20 points.
Which is crazy. I mean, it's crazy to me. Like, the ignore invuln one is 40 points?
40 points for the no invuln one, yeah.
And this one is how many?
20 points.
It's just crazy.
And don't get me wrong, like the word of the Emperor is good. The fight last thing's really cool and that. But like we talked about earlier, you don't want your squishy characters there. Their job is to buff units and give them things and make them do things, not be deep in the enemy lines. And like I said to you, I've never found that I can entirely pull off that no invuln thing. It's really cool on paper and it sounds really good. And if you could pull it off, it's probably the most amazing thing ever. But to get it to work, I think a lot of things have got to go right. Whereas Emperor's Grace is easy to do. It's there.
I think why a lot of the time it works is because when you're building a traditional sisters lists that we come to kind of know and expect, the Bloody Rose style with the kind of trading pieces, you can then trade characters, and you've generally got the miracle dice to bring those characters back. Yeah. The problem I think with your build is you're using a lot of your miracle dice to increase your efficiency or decrease the enemies. Obviously, we talked about the -1 to wound strat from the Sacresants being one of the ways you can do it. Obviously, with no Battle Sisters, you can't do the can only wound them on a 4 strat, but who needs Battle Sisters?
Yeah, no. And I think, again, one of the things I'm sure everybody's looking at is going, well, no Battle Sisters. Like, how are you competing on the board? There are 2 Dog Martyrs in the list.
Rounding off the list, we have 2 Dog Martyrs. Not a single one that we see in most lists. 2 of them.
2 of them. And it is purely for that I'm going to select a unit in my command phase and make it OBSEC. So I select any core unit, which outside of my characters is every unit in that list. And I'm going to make them OBSEC. And but when we used to play obviously OBSEC Necron builds, that it could be still a problem. But what I've generally found in recent games is I'm fighting over 3 objectives. One on the far edge, which now Celestine's looking after. 1 in the middle of the board or 2 in the middle of the board, and then 1 in my own deployment zone. And then, so I can generally make now a unit OBSEC on that middle objective and put enough bodies on there. So I'm actually finding that actually it's not so bad now. Obviously, I've got to play your Necrons again at some point, and I say that with... I've got to recover from my PTSD for that before I play that again anytime soon. I was actually dreading having to face you at that tournament. I thought we were going to get paired, but I managed to avoid you. I narrowly missed you. And you only beat me by 2 points. 2 points. I just needed Liam to hold you off a little bit more.
287 for the Necrons, 285 for the Sisters.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good tournament. But yeah, so the Dogma are there for that very reason. I mean, their prayers are fantastic, as we all know, +1 attack. The 2 I take, Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude, which I don't know how many Sisters players take that, because generally people take 1 and probably take Verse of Holy Piety for the extra Sacred Rite, normally for the +1 to advance and charge. I like Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude because we'll go back to what I was saying earlier about that making yourself really a tough matchup for psychic armies. Yeah. Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude basically turns one of your units into Sisters of Silence.
It's really, really strong. And I think, especially if you look at a unit of 10 Sacresants, you can cover quite a lot of space with those 10. Same with Paragon Warsuits. They're on relatively chunky bases. Yeah. You cover quite a lot of the board. If you can then put that unit in the front and say, go on, try and smite me, because you can't.
Yeah. Yeah, it basically switches off.
I really like it.
Yeah, and that's probably the only time I use the stratagem for the auto prayers. The stratagem that lets you do, like, I think it's 1 CP, automatically pass one of your prayers. That's the only time I use that one, because I absolutely want to be able to go, here's this unit of Sacresants, which with your low AP guns you're not going to kill, and go, you can't smite my army now because they're the closest unit to you.
That's it. And the positioning on that pushing that unit up early or like in the front, if they do want to try and get angles on the other units, they might be able to smite. Even if they can, you've still got that 5 up against mortal wounds, and they're not going to get nearly as many smites or psychic powers into those. Coupling on the fact that you might just deny them on a 5 up anyway.
Yeah, exactly that. So, again, that's one of the reasons I really like that prayer, is just to make that match up even more in my favour. I don't want to be taking loads of mortal wounds, even though I've got a save against it. You don't want to be taking it if you don't have to. My ethos has always been, if you can avoid taking the damage, avoid taking the damage. So put stuff into strategic reserve.
You've literally built the list. That is its mantra.
Yeah, exactly that. So in fact, I think I said that to you, didn't I, with the old Armour of Contempt, and when this new arcs came out, I was like, I actually prefer the new arcs because I'd much rather my Sacresant, my Paragon Warsuits can't be shot than be shot and be tough.
That's it. Yeah.
I'd rather be off the board for free and appear and do their job, so I know they're going to at least get to fire once and charge once. Yeah,
it's funny. I definitely think that was something that wasn't really discussed when arcs kind of first was leaked or spoiled by Games Workshop, and they said, strategic reserve is going to be free. Everyone was like, no Armour of Contempt, detachments are going to be different. We're going to see these new interesting factions. Maybe Votan are going to get allied into some Imperium faction. And strategic reserve was something that wasn't, it was just like, well, strategic reserve, fine. But actually opening up some of these kind of more niche builds like yours, given the flexibility to just, I'm going to stick 6 Paragon Warsuits in strategic reserve. Don't have to pay for it.
Exactly. That would have cost me 4 CP in the previous edition. And, you just can't do that. And actually, that's just a big thing. As I said, coming in off that edge of the board, being able to shoot all those guns. I mean, 2 storm bolters each, a melter each. So per unit, 6 melter shots and 24 storm bolter shots at rapid fire range. And then they're going to charge you as well, which, the swords are strength 7. The maces are strength 9. They damage 2 and damage 3 respectively. High AP on the swords, slightly lower AP on the maces, but obviously higher damage.
Yeah.
They're really good at doing their job, and being able to protect them by not having them on the board. It's just a big thing. Yeah. And so I don't mind losing Armour of Contempt because they're not getting shot. And when they turn up, what I tend to do is pick up the one thing that was going to scare me and killing them. So now I've only got to worry about small arms fire. I'm not worried about small arms fire. That doesn't bother the suits in the slightest.
It doesn't do an awful lot to you anyway. So
yeah.
So kind of rounding it off the list. Obviously, Sisters at the moment, I think 46% win rate as of
the last 5 weeks. I think it's 46% win rate, which when you consider pre-arcs was 55%. I think they were.
Or 55. They were just on the cusp of being kind of
outside good. What the GW like to cap them a little bit. Exactly. So they've had a bit of a fall from grace, and I think part of that is obviously the secondaries. Now, thankfully, they didn't actually get hit that badly. I think the one that did get hit was actually Leap of Faith.
I agree.
The other 2 I think are still absolutely fine. I know a lot of Sisters players went off of Sacred Ground because it's gone down from 5 to 4, but generally speaking, it's still a good 9 to 13 points easy. I mean, in every game I played at the weekend, I had 9 points after my first turn from it.
Amazing, right?
So, I mean, how many other secondaries do you could pick up 9 points in the first turn?
Not many.
Exactly. and then you only really have to worry about trying to get that next 1 or 2, maybe in the last turn, because it completes either in your command phase or at the end of the battle.
Whichever one's first, right?
Yeah, so whichever one's first. So, like, if you go second, great. It doesn't matter if you get onto that objective in the last turn. You're still going to do it. So I still think Sacred Ground is an absolute fantastic secondary. I don't think losing a point on it from 4 to 5 is that big a deal. I think you can still easily get 13 to 15 in it very easily.
I think this was the thing I was saying kind of when we talk about Necrons, about Treasures of the Aeons. It's the same thing. You went from 5 to 4 at the top bracket. Having played it, it's fine. It's not, it's fine.
Yeah.
So do we think Sisters are going to stay Bloody Rose, or do we think we're going to see some more flexibility? And
I think as soon as the Bloody Rose supplement drops, you might start seeing, because I think that drops in June. I think it was. I think
it does, which is also around the time. Rumors, we must say, 10th edition is coming, which will be a whole different ball game.
Yeah, I mean, no one knows what's going to happen there, do they? Because I've seen all sorts of weird and wonderful rumours. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that there's a bit more flexibility in that play. I mean, the thing with Bloody Rose is they've always been a go-to because their sub-faction ability is very straightforward. It does what it says on the tin, and with a faction like Sisters who like to trade, it helps them trade better, right?
They do, absolutely, right.
You can just take a unit of 4 Repentia and get sort of loads of efficiency out of that little blob that cost you 59 points or whatever it is now. I'll be honest with you, I don't know because I don't ever use Repentia.
No, they keep going up in points, so it's probably more than that now.
Yeah, probably. But but they're still a relatively cheap unit, and Bloody Rose just increases that efficiency from that. Yeah. So I can understand why a lot of players play Bloody Rose. I just never have, but I also don't think it fits my personal play style. As you can see from my list there, I'm very much I want to keep my units alive and keep going efficiently with my units that I've got versus throwing stuff away because I've just never been good at that trading game. I
think it's credit as well because you've had actually relatively good success with this list.
Yeah, I mean, last season I had a 73.7% win rate with them, exactly, which great. And my first bit of this tournament, I'm still at 100% because I've won all 3 games. So I'm going to quit now. I'm ahead. I'm done.
That's it. Yeah, just finish now. Don't quit.
And I finished 3rd in the UK last season. I missed a lot of the season because I had some illnesses and an operation, so I missed a bit of the season last year. But I still managed to finish 3rd in the UK, which I'm fairly happy with.
Really, really good, especially considering how many Sisters there were as well.
Yeah, so I didn't do too badly, and I was for the vast majority of that still playing Valorous Heart. It wasn't until sort of Armor Contempt came in, and I kind of lost the bonus of being Valorous Heart. Yeah,
I think it was Nephilim. You kind of Valorous Heart. For those who didn't know, it shifted to you couldn't reroll wounds against it, which sounds really, really strong until you realise there's not a huge amount of reroll wounds in there. But then you lost the ignore AP 1 and 2 on your Sacresants.
Sacresants, yeah, because they didn't get Armor Content.
Which was almost not worth having no rerolls against them.
Absolutely.
When you've got the Canoness who can do that anyway.
Yeah, that was the other thing. I mean, obviously, like I said to you about that sort of hard to kill Canoness earlier. She was what I changed to when this came out because I didn't need Emperor's Grace anymore. So I started with Valorous Heart in it. But I just found that also, at the end of the day, bar the Paragon Royal Suit, that list is T3. So it didn't matter that I wasn't getting no rerolls to wounds because most stuff is wounding me on 3s and 2s anyway.
Yeah.
So
you pivoted to Zephyrim.
Yeah.
And now Arcs of Omen is here. You've gone back to your roots with Sacresants.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, are there any changes you'd make? Kind of the list, kind of after.
No, I mean I'd like to play a few more games before I make any changes. I mean I can't see what I would change in that after that weekend. Everything kind of did its job. Everything did what it was meant to do. I think I found the sweet spot for how Celestine works within the list. One game she did spike and do 6 mortal wounds to Void Weavers, so that was hilarious. Taking 2 of those down instantly. So that was quite fun. But I don't think she's necessarily a frontline fighter that I think I previously thought she was meant to be used for. Yeah. She's definitely obviously you've spoke to me about this loads, and I think this is what sort of prompted me to really give her another go. And actually, I think she's better for flanking and stuff. And actually, you can still give her the Morvenn Vahl rerolls, which actually does make her exceptionally deadly. But actually, I think her sweet spot is that flanking. And like I said, she gave me that option to go do Sacred Ground on a what would normally be a difficult to reach list point for my Sisters, because unless I was willing to chuck a unit of Zephyrim up there, which you don't really want to, just in case it exposes them.
Yeah, definitely.
Because moving 10 models versus moving 3 models, which Celestine is, she was able to a lot of the time get into one of those objectives and be out of line of sight. Or even if she wasn't out of line of sight, she's Celestine. She's very difficult to kill, and even if you do kill her, she's a good chance she's going to get back up.
It's a 2-up, right?
Yeah, exactly that. So
1 out of every 6 games, she's dead. But
I mean, my first game, she died first time. I was very upset. But at that point, the guard player was massively on the back foot, so it didn't matter so much. But yeah, so I found that was her sweet spot, and I don't see what I would change in the list now, because previously I had 20 Zephyrim and not her. But that's because they had quite just the right points to fit them in with the mandatory Battle Sisters. Now I don't need the mandatory Battle Sisters. I can drop the mandatory Battle Sisters and the Zephyrim and pick up Celestine, which before I would be like, oh, I'm not sure about that because Zephyrim have got a lot of attacks. But actually, it doesn't matter.
Attacks herself.
Yeah, and actually I find that, you want to score points. That's the point of the game. As much as we all love killing things and get overexcited sometimes, I know I do. I'm like, oh, look at that target, I want to go kill it. And then I pull myself out of a strategic awkward position. I've done that quite a few times. But generally speaking, you want to score points, and she's really good for doing that. She's really good for doing that sacred ground because she can do it, get into an awkward position that you couldn't normally get to, but more importantly, she's very difficult to kill when she's doing it. And obviously, then next turn she's done it, and she can go off somewhere else, and you've got that. It's almost like with retrieve battlefield data. You want to try and get one of the awkward corners first, don't you? So you can then got your 2 easy corners later on. It's the same with this. You want to get one of those really awkward ones out of the way. So even if you don't want to try and hold that later on because your defender shrine is elsewhere or something like that, you've done it and it's out of the way. And then Celestine's moving around their back. Like they can't just put a little unit into her. She's not like a little Scarab unit or a little Space Marine 5-man unit or something. She's not that. You have to dedicate something to kill her, otherwise she doesn't die. So, when I was playing the Custodes, she did that and then ran into the back line and killed 2 bikes because he'd left them a bit too close. And then that meant he had to sort of pivot his whole entire battle line to then go deal with her. Otherwise, she was just going to sort of start jumping around these back line. And so he had to deal with that, which pulled them away from the advancing Sacresants and Paragon Warsuits. So I just found that that was her sweet spot. I don't think frontline heavy fighter, but getting around those edges, causing a little bit of difficulty in scoring your points. That's what she's really good at.
So we're really happy with this, and no changes. So
no, none. I can't think of any changes I'd make to that list currently. Obviously, I've got to run it a few more times, get to a few more tournaments. I've got a few more tournaments coming up, but yeah, I was really happy with how it performed. Scored the points. I mean, secondaries wise, I only used Leap of Faith once at the weekend, which, in fairness, still can score 10 fairly easily.
Yeah.
It's not the guaranteed 12 it used to be, which I think is where
I think they've done an odd thing where they've made a lot of the ones that weren't guaranteed 12s or 15s kind of down to 10, and made some other secondaries like the World Eaters ones just auto 15s. So they've kind of done a weird thing where they've reduced the common ones that were very easy to get, and changed a few of the other ones to make them really, really easy.
Yeah, and I think this is what's affected the Sisters' win rate, because I think last edition you could barely leave your table half and easily score 90, 97 with Sisters, because you were easily going to get 12 on Leap of Faith. You're probably going to get 15 on Sacred Ground and probably going to get 15 on Defender Shrine, and you didn't even have to leave your table half most of the time.
No. I remember Liam played a game where the guy didn't leave his deployment zone and scored 97 points.
Exactly that. So it's whereas now you have to think about it, because Leap of Faith, you'll probably get 10 on it.
Yeah.
But if your opponent's got good secondaries, you're going to have to think about, actually, is 10 enough to get me over that line? So I actually took Grind against the Guard and the Harlequins player, and then took Leap against the Custodes player, because there's never really any good secondaries to take against Custodes.
They're so strong at the moment.
Yeah, so there's no kill ones. I'm not taking Grind, because while my army's tough, Custodes have like 5 units a lot of the time. So you're not generally going to outkill them. So I think that's the sort of skew I've done now. I've kind of shifted that way. I'm taking Grind a lot more, it seems.
I like it. No, it's good. No, I really do. I think it's. Yeah. I mean, it's really cool to see. And I think we saw this at Albans. Like a lot of people were saying, it's really cool to see Sisters that aren't the typical Bloody Rose Sisters.
Yes.
I hope we see more of it, because there's a lot in that book that I think is really strong.
It's a great book, and I think there's a couple of things G-Dubs have got to do with some of the units. It's a shame a lot of the sort of like the priestly units and things like that don't have like buffs, because they don't get order buffs. You don't ever see them really in lists unless you're sort of running one for a bit more fun.
I made a list recently with a load. I think he had 3 units of max mortifiers, which was actually quite good. But there were some of the kind of usual techniques Sisters use that just don't affect them.
Yeah, exactly that. And so I think there's a bit of work to be done in the codex with regards to some of those units, because I'd like to see a lot more of those on the board, because there's some really fun, cool looking units out there that you'd love to use. I mean, I've got loads of Pentium engines and stuff like that. I love them. They're so cool, but they just don't work with Sisters at the moment, because they just feel it's almost like taking another faction inside your army and not getting any benefits. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. But yeah, I mean, currently, I love this list. It's a great list, and I will be using it probably for the most of this season now.
Well, we'll see the addition out with this list. So I think it's everything we kind of wanted to touch with what you were running in particular. Kind of we touched a little bit on Sisters and where they are. I'm hoping they do a little bit better. I've got a little bit of a love for sisters in me. I've kind of vicariously lived through Dan, which has been lovely.
You have a nice sisters list yourself, and you play Ebon Chalice as well, don't you?
I do play Ebon Chalice.
Yeah, I mean, I think the win rate will go back up. I think sisters players just got to adapt to this new way of playing. I think once people get a bit more to grips of arcs and the secondaries, because you've got to think about it a little bit more now. I think we'll see sisters bounce back.
That's it, and I think I'm hoping we'll see a little bit. People will go back to the drawing board, bring up some new ideas, and then we'll see a bit of resurgence because they are amazing models. And I think seeing them on tables they are really, really cool to see on tables, just thematically. But for now, I think that's us. And if you could like and subscribe, we'd really appreciate that. It helps us grow and all the rest of it. And see you soon.